computer. Okay, as I was saying last week when I was in Tucson, I realized the experience you guys have, and it is funny, the conversations before and after are the biggest difference, I would say. But
well, and when we did that night where we watched The Chosen, afterwards Kay asked a question, and it was such a small thing, but I realized how much I miss hearing from people. So I'm working on a way. I can't, if we let everybody talk at the same time, Zoom just makes a mess out of it. But I'm working on a way that you guys hopefully will be able to ask questions and we can hear you. Here, I gotta let her back in.
oh, sorry.
Instead of just the chat, because the chat's not the same thing. So I'm working on it. But
And the chat's difficult for me because it's hard to read chats while we're studying too, just so you know. A couple of housekeeping things. Thank you guys for those of you who have RSVP'd to the invite. If you haven't seen it, send me another email and I'll send it to you a different way because it might have gotten caught in your spam. The other thing with the invite, there is something that says, what can I bring? So there is a choice on the invite, for desserts, appetizers, sides,
look at
or
the list.
drinks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Where is that on the invitation? I didn't see that.
There's a thing on the side that says, so some of you found it. I don't know. I'm doing it from the administrator's side, but there's something on the invitation because some of you have filled it out, but a lot of you haven't. So I figured it must be. Yes, yeah, you can go back in. So there's that would be helpful. Then, just for locals, I found out that The Chosen isn't only playing in Corpus, it's playing at the Portland Movie Theater, and it's still there. In fact, it's there today at 12, 3, and 7, I think. So if anybody wants to see the first 2 episodes of, and which is a good sign because they had only said they were going to stay like for that opening weekend, but since the response has been so good, the movie theaters are keeping it.
I said it last week, they shocked Hollywood again because they've taken more in than a whole bunch of the movies that studios have spent, $50-80 million on, that they're thinking or might be Oscar contenders, and The Chosen is blowing away what they've taken in on opening weekend. So it's really good. So
anyhow, those are my housekeeping. Okay. So review, we are in the 3rd week of Sermon on the Mount, and I want you guys to remember that Jesus was speaking to his followers, his believers. It says disciples, and in this sense, the disciples means those who were following him and believed what he was saying. This would have been a shocking talk to him. He started off by telling them that they were the blessed, and that the new kingdom that he was talking about was for them. This would have blown their minds. Then he told them that these people who were the common folks and the outcasts, that they needed to be the salt and the light of the world. And that so they needed to share this news with others. Again, this was another thing that would have been shocking. Oh, there's my glasses. And third, and those 2 parts were the easy part. Then he started his sermon or his preaching. And the first thing he told them is that he didn't come to abolish the law, but to fulfill the law. And what he was really telling them, and I'm going to let Scott expand on this, is he was telling them that the Pharisees and the scribes were not really keeping the law. And this would have blown their minds because their whole life they were taught that the Pharisees and the scribes were the righteous, were the holy, were the ones that had God's favor because their life was good.
and so, we've kind of touched on them, more than touched on it, but what you have what I hope we can all understand is, as Mary was saying, they've been told their whole lives that these religious leaders basically are the law. They get to tell everybody else how to live and what they have to do. And they're not following the law themselves. We see that. But this is sort of the kickoff to his really big public ministry. And he is introducing them to this idea. And it's got to be a little tough to, almost frightening after the way they've lived for so long to be told that. But starting out with, you know, you're blessed, you're going to be salt and light, you're going to be the ones that change the way things are done, that change the world. And then he tells them at the end that the law is not going away. He says, I didn't come to abolish the law. I came to fulfill it. The law is not going away. In fact, there's not going to be a single stroke or dot or anything taken from the law until everything is accomplished. And I guess I forget that not all of you do this all week long, but that one line or those few lines get taken. There are people who teach that we're supposed to be living under the old law. We're supposed to be following the dietary laws and the festivals, the holy days, you name it. We're supposed to be living under the law. And it's always disturbed me that that's gotten as much traction as it has. And so what we kind of finished up with last week was he said, I didn't come to abolish the law, I came to fulfill it. And the truth is, you're going to have to be more righteous than the Pharisees and scribes who are teaching you all of this stuff. And that's got to seem like an impossibility. That's these people, you know, they live that way and they beat us up with the law. They tell us how we don't measure up. And what he's telling them is they don't measure up either, boys and girls. They you know, so they use it to beat you up and to make themselves look good. But this idea of being more righteous, he goes on at this little section. We're going to go to the next section today. But he said, you've heard it said, don't murder.
And we did that one last week.
I know that.
Okay.
But I tell you,
Howdy, enter.
I tell you, there he is. Come on in.
We're in the middle of Sunday school. Good morning.
Oh, good morning.
Come on
Didn't
in.
interrupt.
Are you going to come to Sunday school?
Have a seat.
Essentially, yes.
This was unplanned. Have a seat. We'll
Okay.
keep going. This section, and some of you are familiar with it, but he says, you've heard it said this, but I'm telling you, it's more than that. So you've heard it said, don't kill, but I'm telling you, it's about what's in your heart. And if you have that attitude in your heart towards your brother, who's everyone, you're already guilty. Well, the reason he tells them that is because the Pharisees and the scribes have a habit of doing this. As long as we meet the letter of the law, as long as I don't kill somebody, I can abuse them, I can do all of these terrible things, and I'm okay. So since you got to do a review, I'm doing a quick one. The point of this section is that people tend to make it about the doing and not the being. So if I can make some rules and then say I'm keeping the rules, I'm okay. It's about what I do and not who I am. And so we move to the next section. You want to?
So what he does here, and as Scott often tells us, there's no chapters and verses. So it's chapter 5 and part of chapter 6 is he starts telling these people, it's this big crowd of thousands of people, and he says, I'm going to give you some examples of how they're not keeping the law and they're not even really understanding it. As Scott says, the first one was on murder, and that meant anger. The second one is on adultery, and that is Matthew, let's see.
5:27.
5:27. And it says, you have heard that it was said, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman to lust after her has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to depart into hell. Well, that was easy.
Yeah. So what's happened is that once again, these religious leaders have sort of made up their own rules as they went, and prostitutes are a common thing. And what you don't know is that in certain cultures, two people can engage in an act, and one is the good guy and one is the bad guy. And so they've told themselves, well, I'm not really going outside of my marriage. I'm not cheating on my wife, because they've got this whole rationale. And this is, again, directly pointed at what's going on with the religious leaders. And then he says, notice, if your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out. It's better well, it doesn't mean really take your eye out. He's saying you've got to get rid of whatever it is that is causing you this separation from God. Now, the other thing that we don't commonly know is that they've instituted this belief that if you have an amputation, if you lose, when they believe there's going to be a resurrection of our physical body. And if you lose part of your body, you're not really fit for the resurrection. You're going to be a second-class citizen in the resurrection. They've literally been telling people that, and they live in fear of it. And so the right eye, if it's what's causing you, it's better to lose an eye than to let something lead you astray into breaking the real law that God has implemented. And it's better to lose your right hand. Well, they had one hand that was unclean and one that was clean. And he mentions the right side, which is the clean one. So he's really utterly not just challenging, but breaking down the people, the law, and the people who are teaching it. And he's saying you're better off going into the kingdom of heaven with only one hand. And they'll tell you, oh, well, you can't even do that. If you're not perfect like us, then you're not fit for the resurrection. These teachings are directly pointed, Naya.
Oh.
These teachings, this is a strange day. That was our son that came in
And
and
then left.
and then left. We don't know. But these teachings are pointed at the Jewish leaders. I mean, they're really pointed, and they would have all understood that. But today, do we have things that are being taught that perhaps are the laws of man versus the laws of God? Yes, we do. And it's the same challenge today. Are there things that I don't want to give the wrong impression. Sin exists. Things that separate us from God exist. It's not justifying and saying everything is okay. What he's saying is, until you change your heart, all of these rules are not going to help you.
And so with adultery, it's just the idea, it's not that cheating on your spouse as much as it's the same, if you're thinking about it, you're separating yourself.
They would teach that if you lose a hand, you're not fit for the resurrection. And he's telling you, he says, I'm telling you, it's better for you to lose part of your body than to do these things.
Divorce.
Do you think that is just for the leadership? Because we have remnants of that today. That if you're an amputee, or don't get your leg amputated if you have gangrene, because now you're not in shape to be resurrected.
Those
That's
things
today.
Those things happen, and it's not just about amputations, but there's so many things where good people look at others as being less than. By good, that's, I'm doing the quotes, but they look at someone else as being less than them, less deserving than them. And so are there people that still talk about not having amputations? And I don't like to pick on denominations, but there are some people who believe we should not have medical procedures we should just let God take care of things. That's not what this is about. This literally is about them saying, if I do my adultery a certain way, it doesn't count. That's what this is about. So there are it's the teachers. Let me go back. I'm sorry. But if you remember last week, he says, anybody who breaks even the least of these laws and teaches others to do the same is guilty. They'll be the least in the kingdom of heaven. So he's prepared them for the people who are, who else could be teaching the law other than the scribes and Pharisees? Anybody who breaks the least of these and teaches others, there's only one group that teaches. This is very specifically at that time a teaching against the religious institution. So do we have the same thing today? Yes, we do. Sometimes it takes a different form.
But isn't this the beginning of the ground rules that he's setting for the kingdom of heaven? Forget the kingdom of the earth.
Yes.
Whatever it is, religion or Romans or whatever it is, it's not worth it, guys. If you really want to do it, turn yourself into me, you come with me to heaven.
Change your heart. It's not about little nitpicking letter of the law stuff. You'll never get your behavior right until you get your heart right. That's what he's teaching.
Vows, oaths and vows. It gets
Divorce.
easy.
No, you didn't
Oh,
do
divorce. I'm sorry. It has been said, whoever divorces his wife must give her a certificate of divorce. But I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife, except for sexual immorality, brings adultery upon her. And he who marries a divorced woman commits adultery.
Okay, so this is a hard one. This one, you know.
We're both divorced.
And we both need the letter of the law. But it's hard. I mean, when this time where so many people, but let's look at, you have to, again, what he's teaching, the Jewish leaders have cooked it. They weren't supposed to be getting divorced. But what they've done is create an escape route where if you want to get a divorce, all you have to do is hand a certificate to your spouse. It's called a get, like get something, but that's the name of the document. And if you get the paper properly notarized, you know, by the religious leaders, it's over. The vow you took when you were married is null and void because a piece of paper says so. And he says it was not supposed to be this way. You're not supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be, and is that a tough thing? What percentage get divorced now? It used to be 50.
Yeah.
It's ridiculously high. And I know a lot of people find it offensive, but what he's saying is you've made this okay. You've made it easy, and you've put yourself in the position, you leaders, of deciding that if we tell you it's okay, if we give you a piece of paper, you're done. And they literally could just hand the piece of paper to the spouse and be done. It's like, who was it, Joe Montana, that told his wife he wanted a divorce with a text message? You know, oh, by the way, I'll be in. Yeah, it's the same sort of thing. It was this
But it always, this makes, because people have a hard time with it, especially if they're divorced. We were in a class where they acted like we were saying something against them. And like I said, we're both divorced, but at the end of it, what intrigues me about this is this was an issue way back then. There's a bunch of Pharisees that were getting divorces with a get.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, I mean, this has always been an issue.
But
we act like sometimes.
The piece that is implicit that often doesn't get said out loud is that we're forgiven. Okay. It's one thing, it's not saying you can't be forgiven if you do this. What it's saying is that it's not the law that God, it's not the way he intended us to live. And anyone who breaks those laws and teaches others to do it is least in the kingdom of heaven. You have to look at the whole teaching. It's not to say that it's impossible for you to be forgiven. Nobody gets to set that condition up, that you can't be forgiven for this particular thing that you've done that's not according to God's law. But what it does say is it's not how we were intended to live. There is also, if you look at all of these, we're much better off living the other way. We are. And so, don't take the wrong impression or let somebody else give you the wrong impression. Shouldn't do it. We should stop the practice. We should stop telling people, oh, it's no big deal. It is a big deal. But don't let anybody on the other side tell you, if you did this, you can't be forgiven. It's just not the case.
Oaths and vows. Verse 33. Again, you have heard that it was said to the ancients, do not break your oath, but fulfill your vows to the Lord. But I tell you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor should you swear by your head, for you cannot make a single hair white or black. Simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. Anything that comes from anything more comes from the evil one.
So again, it helps to sort of know what's been going on here. One of the things they do is they make these oaths in front of everybody to God, to do God a service. I'm going to do God a service. I'm going to give some money. I'm going to take the Nazarite vow and not cut my hair and not drink alcohol and all. I mean, I'm doing this, and they show off. And then they've actually gotten to the point that they find ways around it. So for instance, I pledge a bunch of money to the temple. And then they come back and say, well, but the 10 commandments say honor your father and mother. And I've got to use that money to take care of my aging widowed mother. So I'm not going to be able to keep the vow I made to God. And it's become commonplace. I tell you what, I can give you half of it, right? I can do that. And so we're taught in several places, if you take a vow to God, keep it. But better, what I'm telling you and what he's saying is don't make those kinds of vows. They have
Just do it.
they would make a vow to God, and then they get condemned. Oh, you're not supposed to use the Lord's name in vain. You're not supposed to do that. So they got in a habit of swearing by Jerusalem. Jerusalem is something greater than me, or I swear by my parents, or I swear by all of these things. And what Jesus is teaching, once again, this stuff that has become commonplace. There's a saying, never trust a used car salesman who calls himself Honest John. If someone has to tell you that they're honest, you need to sort of be cautious, right? And they say, I swear by the head of my children, I swear by Jerusalem. And he's saying, if you're going to make an oath before God, keep it. If you're not going to keep it, don't make the oath. Honestly, he says, you're better off just let your yes be yes and your no be no. Because, and remember, he's telling this to his people. He's telling this to his disciples, because over here at the temple, in the synagogues, you have people breaking their vows. You have people swearing, by heaven about certain things. And he says, for my people, don't do that. Just let your yes be yes and your no be no. And you'll come to be known as people who tell the truth. You'll be known as people that when they say yes or they say no, it carries weight. It means something. So stop this practice. And it's, it's maybe hard to understand why he went to the trouble of identifying it. But they've become so utterly corrupt that nothing really means anything anymore. Do you read the news? Do you watch TV or get on the internet? It's gotten to the point, I don't, if I read something, I don't care who said it. I don't even know if I can believe it anymore. Even the good guys, right? Because they're good because they're my side. But they say these things and, there is no inflation. But on the other hand, the other side says other things. We're in the same sort of state. And he says, for us, for my disciples, don't do business that way. Just let your yes be yes, your no be no, and tell people the truth.
And just like religion, the religious people during this time had messed things up. I mean, we were listening to something last night, there are religions out there that when someone is called to court and they're supposed to swear to God they're going to tell the truth, they say, the Bible tells me because of Matthew 5, and there's another section in James 5 that says, do not take oaths. I cannot take an oath. And once again, it's like not understanding what it's saying, but there are people out there who are
Do you
following.
swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and they refuse?
They refuse because they say the Bible tells me I can't take an oath.
Well, you can say yes.
That's right.
Let your yes be
But-
yes.
But I don't know, it's when you look at the Pharisees, we put the Pharisees like they were a mess, but so is a lot of our rules that we have put into place in different religions.
The context that you can't lose in this teaching, in this section of Matthew, is that this is him teaching disciples, this is how I want you to live. They're disciples. Well, their job is to learn the things that he teaches, and this is directed at them. He says, if you go up to Jerusalem, you're going to see all kinds of stuff. You're going to see them telling you it's okay for us to do this. And he says, you're going to have to be more righteous than them because they tell you it's okay. And I'm telling you that it's not. And it's not just the things that you do, it's what's in your heart. You're deceiving someone, but you come up with the way, and that's going to have a negative impact on them, but you come up with the way of telling yourself, well, it's okay if I do it just this way. That's what he's teaching.
It's also a fundamental shift. This is the primacy of God. That's what he's teaching. Forget the Pharisees, forget everything else, the primacy of God. And he's going to tell it in the very last sentence, be perfect like the Father.
Well, yep.
I mean,
We'll get there.
it's getting that revolution the religious people were all upset about.
He is definitely saying that the way it is a form of revolution. Look at this next section and we'll.
So I'm on verse 38. Love your enemies. You have heard that it was said, eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I tell you not to resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on your right cheek, turn to him the other also. If someone wants to sue you and take your tunic, let him take your cloak as well. And if someone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. Give to the one who asks you, and do not turn away from the one who wants to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Do not even tax collectors do the same? And if you greet only your brothers, what are you doing more than others? Do not even Gentiles do the same? Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect.
So here's another one of these tough things. Let's start with the very first part of that. You've heard it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Everybody knows that saying. What doesn't get taught is that was not intended ever to be a recipe for vengeance. Actually, what would happen is they'll say, well, if someone pokes out your eye, you can burn down their fields and kill their whole family and, destroy generations. I mean, whatever, you go get vengeance. And the original teaching,
Which was in Leviticus.
which was in Leviticus about an eye for an eye, is the idea that you don't overdo, justice and turn it into vengeance. If you have to have justice, then at least make it the same, make it commensurate. I hate to use that word, but make it just. You remember the Godfather movie, the beginning of it, and this guy comes in and says his daughter was attacked and raped and disfigured somehow. They beat her so badly it messed her face up. And he says, I want you to kill him. And even the Godfather says, that would not be justice. Your daughter is still alive. That's an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But keep in mind, as we do the rest of this section, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth was actually sort of revolutionary, because in the world, it was common that if somebody does you wrong, you're free to do anything you want to. It was if not almost a kindness.
This was fair. In other words, this was a fair way to punish someone. If someone did you wrong, you can get them back by doing the same thing. Justice,
Or
not-
more even.
Yeah.
An eye for an eye says you can do the same thing, but that's Leviticus. That's the Levitical law. It says, you've heard it said, eye for eye and tooth for tooth. But I tell you, don't resist an evil person. I tell you, that's not good enough. Now, in what world does this make sense? Well, he's telling you in his world, in the kingdom of God, it makes sense. And this is, for me, the hardest teaching. It's the hardest of the bunch. It is. And the only thing that I find amazing is that after however many decades of working on it, occasionally I'm able to actually do this. Just let it go. So he says that don't resist an evil person. If someone slaps you on your right cheek, an eye for an eye says you slap them right back. And he's saying that's the Levitical law, but I'm telling you, if necessary, just even say here, do you want to slap, slap me on the other side? It's two kingdoms at play. We keep coming back to that. And it is so illogical. It is so upside down that nobody else is teaching this. Go to Jerusalem, go to the temple, go to the synagogues. Nobody's teaching this. This is utterly different. If someone sues you to take your tunic, give them your cloak as well. Remember who he's talking to. Remember who's talking, and remember who he's talking to. And this is preparation for who he says he wants his people to be. And it's not new. It's not like God never wanted us. Some of this stuff, I sometimes think maybe it just took time for us humans to get to the point that we could hear this. And even then, and even now, we only hear it to a point. If someone demands that you go with them a mile, well, this is that idea that some people are lesser than others. So a very rich, powerful person could demand that you carry the stuff for them, and he may toss you a shekel at the end, but you have no choice but to carry his stuff for a mile. And he says, I'm telling you, if they demand that, tell them you'll take their stuff a second mile. Now, what does that say to that person? They're going to look and say, what is different about this person who says, I'll carry your stuff a second mile? If someone slaps you on the face and you say, look, if that's what you have to do, have the other one too. The person doing the slapping is going to step back and go, what's different here? What is with this person? Is this person crazy? No, they don't seem crazy. What are they up to? I can tell you, when we were in Israel, they had those roundabouts, you know, the traffic circles. Mary's laughing because she knows what's coming. They are vicious in Israel. They are brutal. The traffic hits those things and they never slow down. They're doing 45 and you just have to dodge. And if you don't get out there, the person behind you is on their horn instantly. It's brutal. But I came home one day and I said, Mary, I've discovered something. If you get on the traffic circle and you're polite, it scares everybody so bad it stops traffic.
He would sit there going around, it's like, you tell them, go ahead. And they're like, they wouldn't go ahead.
You know how
What's up with him?
we get to a stop sign and you know, we might wave the other person, even though technically we got there a half second before they did. I'm telling you, I showed her, I could recreate it at will, that if you are on the traffic circle on one and you wave to the person on the other side, they hit their brakes. Instantly, they will stop because you must be up to something.
You're gonna rear end them or something.
And I know that sounds funny, but put it in the context of this teaching. If someone slaps you on one side of the face and you say, here, I'm not going to hit you back, which is what they expect. And we start this whole thing. If that's what you got to do, here's the other cheek. It says something. It says something about who we are. It makes an impression. Keep in mind, this is Jesus teaching his followers about how he wants us to live. And it is hard to not take that first impulse. I got so aggressive driving in Israel that when I came back here, we went back to San Antonio and the traffic on the freeway was laughable. I literally, there were times I said, sir, I've been to Israel. I've driven there. You don't intimidate me at all. That's the way we understand to behave. You be a little more aggressive than the next person and you'll win. This teaching is about being a different way. This is about the heart. And it's not what you're going to see in Jerusalem at the temple and at the synagogues. You're never going to see this. He is teaching them something, and this is early teaching. He's beginning to instruct his followers about how he wants them to be.
It's not early, but it's also what you're going to see at the crucifixion.
Oh,
You're
absolutely.
going to see Jesus himself follow his own.
Well, thank you, Gene. Absolutely. And I probably should have said it, so thank you for saying it. It is never more clearly demonstrated than we see in, you know, just a couple of years when he goes to the cross and they do these things. And at the end, he's praying for them. Father, forgive them. They don't even understand what they do. And I, at some point, needed to mention, you notice how he's constantly talking about the Pharisees, the scribes. Find me a place where he goes on a tangent. He goes railing at the Romans. He doesn't do it. This is not about government. This is not about politics. This is about human on human. And he's not out there saying, I want you to resist the Romans, or I'm calling the Romans out for their behavior. He says at the end, they don't know any better. But you people, my disciples, have to know better. And that's what he's teaching. And it is a good point. It's never more clearly demonstrated. It is probably the thing we should go back to when we find ourselves wanting to retaliate. When I was still 2, I think, I told you I came from the world heavyweight champion of grudge holders.
And he remembers when he's 2.
And someone on the street had done something mean. And my grandmother, bless her heart, was so angry. Her lips were shaking. Somebody should take a baseball bat to him. And short time after that, they noticed I wasn't present. Where's Scott? Where is he? And they look around the house and they look outside, and 2-year-old Scott is dragging a baseball bat down the sidewalk. Retaliate. That's how we live. And again, I come from the you know, absolute apex predator when it comes to getting revenge. And what he's teaching, no, I can say this, I don't mind telling you, this is the big flaw in me, is that I fancy myself as a bringer of justice, right? You notice back there in the Beatitudes, he didn't say, blessed are the judgment bringers because God needs your help. He doesn't say that. It's blessed are the meek, the justice bringers, the peacemakers, blessed are the peacemakers, not the justice bringers. This is my personal, I don't know, cross to bear or whatever else. And as I said, I'm only amazed that at times I've been able to do this. I have realized in time not to slap back instantly. And it's how we're supposed to be. That's the example, as Gene says, that we have on the cross. We have an example for this.
We're on 40,
I don't know where.
43. Yeah. So now you have heard it said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you.
Love your friends and hate your enemies. And he says that, even the tax collectors do that. Duh, love your friends and hate your enemies. The tax collectors are a group of people that everyone despises. The Jewish leaders despise them, but the other people do, because a lot of them are Jews who have decided to go work for the Romans and betray their own people by, now somebody was going to do it. But here are people who we look at, and by we, I mean those people listening, we look at as being dogs. And as we heard last night, dogs are, in their mind, filthy creatures. And that's what they call tax collectors. They're dogs.
And I just love thinking about this now. Remember who's writing this gospel. Matthew is writing this gospel, and Matthew was a tax collector.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I mean, and so, and I'm sure he said it, but I'm sure it really hit Matthew too, of how he was,
Even tax collectors do that. Nothing personal, Matthew. Even tax collectors do that. But he says that these people that we look at as being dogs, and incidentally, when we were in Israel, they have stray cats all over the country. They don't have dogs running around. It's like that today. But even a lowly dog tax collector loves his friends and hates his enemies. I want you to be different. I want you to be more than that. And once again, these are human beings. These are children of God. And so loving your friends is no big trick. I want you to love the ones who despise you and pray for the ones who do mean things to you, to pray for them. And again, Gene, that's what we saw on the cross at the last moment, him praying for the people that had nailed him there, that had, been so unjust in their treatment of him.
I'm going to focus on verse 48 because it hangs people up. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. That sounds like a tall order.
Perfect. As I say, the reason I deal with words so much is because they lead us astray. They're the only way we communicate. But that word is teleoi. Tele meaning a distance, like telephone, television, teleprompter, all these things at a distance. And what the word is about is something that makes it to its completion, that becomes whole, that becomes complete at the end. And he says, what I'm telling you is God makes it rain on the just and the unjust. Crops come up for people who are mean to you. And if God does that, I'm asking you to do the same thing. And the idea of it coming to completion is that for us, it's a journey. You don't pick this word, teleoi, by accident. To become complete is not a thing that happens instantly. It's like a journey that eventually comes to its completion. It's a goal that comes to its completion. That's what he's teaching. And he says, I want you to pay attention to the fact, as he says in this section, he makes it rain on the just and the unjust. If he can do that for you, and of course, who do we always think we are? Well, we're the just. It's those other people that he makes it rain on that don't deserve it, not me. I deserve it. I'm one of the just. We're not, none of us. God does these things for us. He shows his love in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. He does this for us. He loves us even when we don't deserve it. And that last bit is a part of this whole teaching that says, I want you to love people who don't deserve it. I want you to show the same love that you see from the Father to these people around you. It's not telling us that we somehow become perfect in that we can do no wrong. Sorry, but that's not what that word is.
And I always think of, and you can quote it, when Paul was towards the end of his life and he talks about the race well run.
I've run the good race. I've fought the good fight. And it is a race. It is a journey. And to take it to its completion is not an instant thing. I'm sorry.
But that word, say it again.
Teleoi.
He's saying God the Father is teleoi.
It is a.
You're really perfect right then, and you're complete. There's only one guy,
That's true.
God, which is already set up at the beginning of the little vignette that he's told us about.
What?
So we can be perfect. We are in effect created by the perfect one.
We are made in his image, and it doesn't mean that he has 10 fingers and toes. Not every human has 10 fingers and toes. So the image that we're made in is exactly this, but it takes work. The teaching is for you to look at other people and understand that God has given you this grace, and he's teaching his followers, I want you to show that same thing. I mean, that is the teaching.
And so there wouldn't have been any chapter 6. I'm going to do at least the first part of giving to the needy. Chapter 6, verse 1, be careful not to perform your righteous acts before men to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So when you give to the needy, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues, and go on the streets to be honored by men. Truly, I tell you, they already have their full reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. I mean, this is most evident that he is talking about the Pharisees. He's talking about the Pharisees.
Well, he says so.
Yeah, he says so here, so you can't miss it this time.
Yep, it gets gotten to the point now. He says, don't do what the hypocrites do in the synagogues and on the streets. This whole thing, as I keep telling you, is a teaching to tell them they're going to have to do something better than what they see in the temple and the synagogues. And so you see this today. You're not going to have any problem understanding that there are people who like to do good deeds, like to give away their money, but they do it so publicly that they get, a hospital wing named after them, right? And I get a plaque. I'm going to be there forever. Everyone, even after I'm dead, people are going to revere me because I'm not saying this is not a teaching against wealthy people, but they've done it for the purpose. It's not about the poor people. You've heard me tell before about our daughter that's at Christmas under the bridge, and all of the people throwing the party are in a little circle, and they never even talk to the poor people, the homeless people that live under the bridge. And he says, let's see, be careful not to perform your righteous acts before men to be seen by them. If you do, you'll have your reward from you will have no reward from your Father in heaven. So there's a parable that he tells about Lazarus, there's a certain rich man, and he's got everything. He's just filthy rich, and everything, servants bring him everything. And there's a poor man named Lazarus who hangs out by the gate, who's covered in sores, who doesn't have anything to eat. And he begs to get just sustenance, right? And he tells how at some point they both die. And this is a parable. Don't try and take this, but he says here's Lazarus with Abraham. And here's the rich man who's in a place of torment. He is separated from God. And he looks up, he can see, this is a parable. But he says, hey, Abraham, send that servant guy down here to comfort me. Have him bring me some water, would you? And what he's showing with this parable is that there are people who look at others as being less than them. And even in death, even after death, this rich person sees Lazarus as being the same beggar that he's always been. And I deserve to have him come wait on me, come comfort me. It's about how he sees that man, and it's ultimately about how he would have seen the man in life, that he still isn't over it in this setting. This teaching that to do your good deeds in public so that everyone can see how good you are, you don't really care about the person. You care about getting the acclaim. You care about getting the kudos and the recognition. And so he tells this thing that says, when you're giving, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Do it in secret. Keep it secret from yourself. Don't even think yourself in terms of, look at this great thing I'm doing. Look how good I am. Let your right hand give to the needy person, and don't let it come back up the line and think what a great person I am. Just do it.
And I want to say, for someone who raises a lot of money for things, but I do want to say this, that it's not, there are people who have their names on hospital wings who also do a lot of things in private. And then there are people who have their names on things that the only way they give is if they get the name. So I'm not saying that we're not saying that people that get credit for their giving are bad. Nope. But they have gotten what Jesus is saying is they've gotten their credit there. If it is, and it's not even a credit thing. If you're going to do something good, you can do it. You should do it in private if that's what you're doing. And I was just thinking about it. Think about this. And I think of the Chosen, the last episode, when you think of the people he was talking to, a lot of them were outcasts and poor. They definitely weren't the rich. And he's telling them, give to the needy. And this was a challenging thought to them too, in a different way, because how many people think, the rich can give their money away, but I don't have anything to give. And, Jesus gives that parable of the widow who still gave something. So this was a tough teaching. Sometimes we think like Jesus was saying, the Pharisees were bad and you guys are good, but this is a tough teaching to these people. You're supposed to give to the needy. Even if you think you're hurting, you should still be able to do something. Well,
it's almost time to quit, and I've been waiting for an opportunity. I've been kind of thinking that I need to do this, and not to correct exactly, but this is not really a teaching about giving to the needy. And one of the things I know is that when I talk about stuff like this in the past, none of you, but there are other people who think, oh, he's telling me that I need to give more money. And you notice that we not only don't ask for donations, we don't accept them if offered. We don't do that. So it's not about that, but people, oh geez, now this is about me needing to give up some of my money. And this teaching that constantly sounds like, it's against wealthy people. It is not. And what I would tell you, I try not to tell anybody, this is how you need to live. This is what you need to do. If you're doing something because I tell you, we've both failed, right? I'm at least as human as any of the rest of you, probably more so. What this is, and the idea behind the teaching is, and if you're blessed enough to have some wealth, before you even talk about whether or not to give money to someone, it's about seeing that person as being a child of God. It's about seeing that person as being worthwhile, as being blessed by God. Blessed are, that's what this whole thing is about. And at some point, if the heart is changed, then it's between you and the Spirit about, do I help this one particular person? You can't give money to the whole world. And yet there are people who I'm convinced are put in front of us for us to help. But that's not up to me. That's not what I'm teaching. What he's saying is you have to see these people, the people in the synagogues, the people who are doing these things, don't even notice. It's Christmas under the bridge. They don't even notice the poor people. It's all about the other wealthy people seeing how generous you are. You start by changing the heart and by seeing that person as, you know, God makes it rain on them just like he does you. You're no better. And if you change that, then you know, if at some point you hear from the Holy Spirit that says, I should help this person, well, do it. That's between you and God. That's between you and the Spirit, not me. That's not the teaching. Is that okay?
It is, and it's 10:04.
I'm sorry, Mary.
No.
That's right.
Is it related to blessed are the meek?
Of course it is. That's why there are no chapter and verses. It's all one big thing. And this starts at this place and it goes on. But yeah, it is the same thing. So it's 10:05. God, when we stop to look, realize that we aren't worthy. We don't deserve the blessings that you pour out. We didn't earn them. And the other people are no worse or worse off than us. The one thing that I ask for through this teaching, through this study, is to help us see that the people around us, the people we pass by, the people we ignore, the people we use, are your children too. And to give us the recognition that it's our opportunity, but it's also our calling to bestow the same grace that we already received. Show us that as we go out this week. Be with us, be with those we've asked to bring comfort to, because you know these are hard times. And you know we're asking that these situations be made better for them. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, guys. You can unmute yourselves. And like I said, if you guys have problems with the invite or didn't get it, let me know. That would be great.
Thanks, Mary.
You're welcome.
Thank y'all.
You guys have a
Thank
good
you.
week.
Have a great week.
Have a great
Bye-bye.
Speak.
Rob, I haven't seen you. It's good to see you. And then, oh, Jack, there's Jack. All right, Jack and Sherry, you're right next to each other on our, I don't know, our disappearing friends.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.